This is a transit that almost all astrologers are extremely excited about. Disruption of information gaps and dominant narratives, social media activism breakthrough. There is some kind of a bigger force pushing us into a direction. Inhale. Exhale. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. Hello, I'm Freya, and welcome to Wings of Wisdom, where spirituality and critical thoughts align to light your path. Together, we'll explore how philosophy and traditional wisdom can guide you to a deeper and fuller well-being. For those of you who know, I have been writing astrology energy updates since the spring equinox. Today, I want to unpack a bit what is going to happen in June and July, especially June 21st to July 21st energy-wise. And in this month, we have three themes: emotional foundations, shifts in communications and values, and retrograde reflections. You can read my full update on Substack, and also you can sign up through email to receive these updates as newsletters straight into your inbox. For those of you watching on YouTube, I've included here a calendar color-coded to show you a brief outlook of how these three themes are spread across the month. So for emotional foundations, first we start with June 21st, when the sun enters Cancer and when we have the summer solstice. Solstices are always a very powerful moments of the year for you to align, to reset, to take a pause, to reflect, to set new goals, because it has been celebrated throughout the history of human civilization. And the kind of equal partition of the solstices and equinoxes forming a cross talks about the rhythm of Earth and how the energy of the Earth would move in this rhythm that we as humans should oblige to, should tap into to better achieve what we want to do. The summer solstice specifically is the time of the year when we have the longest hours of daylight on Earth, and therefore it has the most yang energy and the least yin energy. Starting on the second day of solstice, the yin energy starts to get a little bit more, and until the autumn equinox, that will be a moment where the yin energy has grown to the extent that it's parallel to the yang energy, when the day and the night are equally long. And then when we go into winter solstice, the yin energy will be growing and the yang energy dropping. So it's a cycle of growth and changes, flows of energies. And because of the nature of summer solstice being a lot of yang energy and very little yin energy, and starting from solstice, I think it's an invitation for us to slow down a little bit, to change the outward expansion into nurturing of our inner landscapes. Also, the sun is moving into Cancer, a sign that is about home, about emotions, about protection, about safety, about being softer. This month, I think, is inviting us to turning inward and to build passages of emotions for our own inner transformation. So less about getting things done outside, and maybe it's time to start thinking about how much we have grown. And the etymology of solstice actually means the sun standing still. So it's a great moment to pause a little bit, to check in with yourself, the progress that you have made from the spring equinox up till now, the first quarter of an astrological year. And then at this benchmark, thinking about the next 3 months and what you want to achieve. And right on the next day of the solstice, which is June 22nd, the sun, which has just entered Cancer, would be squaring Saturn, who has entered Aries not long ago, I think last month in May. And Saturn is about responsibility, and Saturn in Aries is about getting things done. But the Cancer sun, I said Cancer is about emotionality, softness, family. it has a very different energy. So the square aspect also is a hard aspect that may create tension between feelings and actions, between caring for other people and also protecting your own energy. And if you're struggling between your heart and your duty, what you should do and what you want to do, just take some time to listen to your heart and to see what is coming out from the place of love. And that love has to be first for yourself and then for others. So this is a criteria for you to make decisions. On the same day, we have Mars sextile Jupiter. Mars is in Virgo, sextile Jupiter in Cancer, which is a kind of harmonious supporting aspect that helps us out, I think, in the square situation, which is more difficult. So the Mars and Jupiter suggestion would be make practical and small steps for building your own emotional structures so that you can nurture yourself and also those around you without either neglecting other people nor neglecting your own needs. And especially Mars in Virgo, it says like it doesn't have to be anything grand or dramatic. Like taking a walk and making that into part of your routine can also be a great way to do that. 2 days later, on June 24th, the Sun would be conjuncting Jupiter, who has just entered Cancer not long ago. And Jupiter is a planet about abundance, about good fortune. And I think it would be a very lucky day that shows us something maybe you're worried about 2 days ago on the Sun-Saturn square. You would find that it's not as scary as you thought, and that things and tension problems might be solved in unexpected ways, as Jupiter always has that energy to solve things unexpectedly. Remember to use the energy of that day to boost your confidence, your trust, and optimisms for things that may seem unknown and scary at the moment. But Jupiter should be there having our back, so no worries about that. On June 25th, we have a new moon in Cancer, which would be, I think, one of the softest new moons in the whole year because Cancer is directly ruled by the moon. So it is a time to ask yourself, what do I need to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel nourished? And it is a time to set your emotional foundation for a new period going ahead. And Cancer invites you to actually step out of your comfort zone because Cancer sometimes can get defensive and stays in the area where it feels safe. But this new moon, I think, gives you courage to step outside of your comfort zone and also turn what you thought would be vulnerability into your strength by knowing your emotions, knowing how you feel, and tapping into that emotional intuition as a gift. And I would suggest tuning into ancestral wisdom and motherly figures for guidance and protection. And you could also declutter your living space, again, the home, and make it a sanctuary for your own energy. The full moon in Capricorn takes place on July 10th, and it perfectly ties back to the Sun-Saturn square we talked about that's happening on June 22nd. And this is, again, I think a time to find the balance between your heart and duty and to check your progress in structuring your emotional foundations. And Capricorn is a sign that's about maturity. Although Capricorn most of the time are not really associated with feelings and emotions, but indeed it is in the character of Capricorn being very organized, disciplined, and committed that will help us build emotional maturity and to build a structure that will sustain our emotional health. So this full moon would ask you to reflect whether you have exercised your agency to support your own emotional health, whether you have set your boundaries or let go of toxic relationships, or whether your schedule in real life actually reflects your priorities that you are wishing for. Remember that it is your own responsibility to take care of your own emotional foundations. And the full moon in Capricorn does not accept any excuses for overworking yourself and overstretching yourself. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. Now we have the next theme, which is shifts in communications and values. First of all, we have Mercury entering Leo on June 26th, the second day right after our new moon in Cancer. Leo is a place of passion, and combined with Mercury, it's a place that encourages self-expression. So if you have set your intention to build your own emotional foundations on the new moon a day ago, that would be a time to finally start expressing your needs and foundations unapologetically. Yet the meaning of Mercury entering Leo exceeds beyond just the theme of the Cancer month, because it quickly taps into the great shifts in collective subconsciousness, where it trines Saturn and Neptune on June 28th. Saturn and Neptune has been such a big topic in astrology because they're coming close to conjunct each other. And on June 28th, they are within half a degree, which means they're already impacting each other. And at that moment, their trine with Mercury is giving energetic lifts and shifts to how we communicate, think, and express as individuals and as a collective. Aries and Leo energies will make these changes fiery and encourage you to take leadership of your own actions instead of overthinking about every single consequence. That's what we like about the fire signs, right? Of course, this is not to say that the ego should just go around uncontrolled, but it is really to know what you need to do and to commit to doing that. And that is on June 28th, when Mercury, an inner planet, personal planet, trine Saturn, which is a social planet, and Neptune, which is an outer planet. So you can see all these layers, levels of complexity and of influence activated in this moment, in this day. And the next day, Mercury would form opposition with Pluto on June 29th, which has gone retrograde since May 4th, asking us to challenge outdated systems and resist unequal power dynamics. On this day, on June 29th, you might still find that there would be residues of old limiting beliefs or shadows within us. And Mercury, because it has moved into Leo, will help us shine light on what still needs to be done, to be cleansed, and to be dealt with. And these residues might also manifest through the form of another person, and you just might get triggered in your conversations, in a dialogue. So be mindful of how you're processing and channeling your own patterns and beliefs when you're interacting with other people. Next, we have Venus, which conjuncts Uranus on July the 4th. Venus is the planet of beauty, pleasure, and value, and Uranus is the planet for revolution and innovation. So them conjuncting together might manifest in that you feel the urge to change things up, to shake things off, or you might just face sudden changes in your tastes, in your relationships, in your finances. Because at this point, Uranus is still in the last degree of Taurus, which is about money and the stock market as well. So this is a day where you have to be cautious, I think, about your financial decisions. On the same day, later in that day, Venus also enters Gemini, directing our attention to communications and mental stimulations. So there might be opportunities, new opportunities in writing, in media, technology, and networking. And 2 days later, on July the 6th, Venus would take its turn to interact with Saturn and Neptune. It will form a sextile. It's just about a week after Mercury has trine with them. So I think this is updating our values, which is associated with Venus, to align with our beliefs, which is Mercury, as Venus is also in the sign of Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. And these two personal planets kind of tapping into the social planet and the outer planet energy will be collaborating to ushering individual changes in us that could help us to transition into bigger social and generational changes. Speaking of generational changes, on July 7th, Uranus would be entering Gemini. And that's on the second day, right after Venus has conjuncted it. So Uranus is always the rebels that break conventions. The energy of Uranus would now go into the realm of Gemini, which includes AI. Google has already used Gemini as a name, and data, social media, language, music, etc. There would be, I think, again, new leaps in tech or AI, disruption of information gaps and dominant narratives, or social media activism breakthrough. And those would be events that entirely shift how we process, exchange, and value information. And as these changes unfold, it is also a time to individually practice critical thinking and discernment, and be careful of information overload at the same time. On the same day of July 7th, Venus also trine Pluto, inviting us to find values, which is with Venus, in standing up for our truth, which is about Pluto. And sometimes it requires us to go into deep and difficult places. Uranus moving into Gemini marks the full bloom of individual and collective changes on Earth as a whole. By now, all three outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, have changed signs, as well as two social planets, Saturn and Jupiter. And all this changing of signs have happened in the last few months. Pluto from last November, Neptune end of March, Uranus July, Saturn and Jupiter both in May and June. The impact of them should be very sensational and seismic as we go into the second half of 2025. Again, the impact of the outer planets are deep, wide, and generational, while the social planets would change our individuals' connection to larger structures in our community and our society. I feel like at this point I have to throw in some numbers to exemplify how important all those changes are. So it takes Pluto in average 20 years to change signs. For Neptune, 14 years, Uranus, 8 years, Saturn, 2.5 years, and Jupiter, 1 year. What is also significant is that Neptune and Saturn have both entered Aries, thus starting a new astrological cycle, which usually would take Neptune 165 years and Saturn 29.5 years to complete. Besides, it's incredibly rare that all these planets are changing signs in such a short period of time, even across probably the last few centuries and more. And these changes would mark 2025 a very important year, and I'm really looking forward to see how the second half of the year is going to unfold. I mean, the first half is already crazy enough. I think there will be more to come. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. The third section is retrograde reflections. Yes, I've talked about generational changes, I've talked about societal shifts. Now I think the universe has planned a period of time for these energies to settle and final adjustments to be made. Neptune will start retrograding on July 4th, which is the same day when Venus is gonna conjunct Uranus and then moving into Gemini. So I think it is asking us to decide whether what we communicate actually channels what we believe, which is about Neptune. and whether information that we receive should be trusted or not, because Neptune sometimes is associated with confusion, lies, illusion as well. On this day, when Neptune starts retrograding and Venus conjuncting Uranus, illusions should really be lifted and confusions alleviated. It could be a harsh time for reality check, but we all know that sometimes it's good to hear the hard truth. And on July 13th, Saturn also starts retrograding. And I think it's checking in with our establishment of self-authority. In the previous update, I was talking about what Saturn in Aries means. And I think it is about establishing yourself as a system. And before Saturn starts retrograding, it is only 0.13 degree away from Neptune, which is extremely close meeting. And the precise conjunction, meaning the same degree, same minute, will happen next year in February within the first degree of the first zodiac sign, so 0 degree Aries. And that is a heavily symbolic placement because it is not only the beginning, but the birth of a beginning. This is a transit that almost all astrologers are extremely excited about, as it is about combining structure, which is Saturn, with consciousness and Neptune, and materiality with spirituality. And although we are not there yet, from June 23rd to August 8th, Saturn and Neptune would be within half a degree orbit to influence each other. I think that would give us a taste test for next February. On July 18th, Mercury starts retrograding in Leo as well, which is a moment to check in with your ego in communications. And I think this goes hand in hand with other retrogrades on other levels. This Mercury retrograde is really asking us to understand where we are so that we can move forward with humility and also dignity. Besides checking on the ego, this could also be a time to revisit past arguments and make interpersonal reconciliations, because we have Mercury sextile Venus at the same time. So if you have really established your emotional maturity, your emotional foundations in the Cancer month, you will be able to gain those relationships and those emotional connections during the Mercury retrograde period. With all that being said, if you're new to astrology, please don't feel pressured to subscribe to everything I say. I think I appreciate astrology as anchor points and starting points for self-explorations, which you can go off into your own, bouncing off any ideas that I've said here. But if something does resonate with you, go off onto it and practice in your daily life. Every time I write these energy updates are like little study sessions of what the universe has planned for us. And every time there is something new and intricate to find out in those movements. Personally, I really appreciate seeing that there is some kind of a bigger force pushing us into a direction. But I think also what matters is that we, after reading this energy update, after knowing what's going to happen, put that into the practice of daily life. I often go back and check on my own energy update throughout the month because, reading, writing the energy update is one thing, but living and practicing its content, its message is a totally different challenge. So I encourage you all to take this as an opportunity to go deeper into yourself, take whatever messages that resonate with you, and I hope they help to build a stronger, calmer, more loving self in this very difficult and crazy times. That's the best that we can do. Inhale. Exhale. Wings of Wisdom with Freya. Thank you for listening, watching, and being here. You can find more of my content on Substack, YouTube, and Instagram. My name is Freya, and this is Wings of Wisdom. Take care, and see you next time.